General Adrian Cole had been out of his car for less than a minute when the white SUV behind him laid on the horn. Not a quick tap, a long angry blast that turned heads across the parking lot. Adrian looked back at the vehicle, then at the painted lines beneath his own dark blue sedan. He was centered inside the space, no handicap marking. No reserved sign, no loading zone stripe. Nothing about it belonged to anyone. The driver's door of the SUV opened. A white woman in her early 50s stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and a cream-colored jacket that looked too expensive for the grocery store lot. She left her engine running. Seriously? Adrian glanced behind him once, checking whether she might be talking to someone else. She wasn't. You saw me waiting. Adrian looked toward the lane. I saw you behind me. I was waiting for this space. You didn't have your signal on. Her mouth tightened. That doesn't mean you just take it. Adrian kept one hand on the rear door of his sedan. He had come to Westbridge Market for two things: coffee beans his sister liked, and the cinnamon pastries his mother insisted were better here than anywhere else in Fairfax County. That was supposed to take 15 minutes. His mother was 78 and recovering from a hip replacement at his sister's house 5 miles away. Adrian had spent most of the morning assembling a shower chair, while his sister laughed at the fact that a man who could run military operations across continents needed 40 minutes to understand a bag of plastic bolts. He was still wearing the same faded navy polo and tan pants. No unidriver, no security detail, no stars. Just Adrian Cole, carrying his mother's handwritten shopping list in one pocket. The woman stepped closer. I've been circling for 10 minutes. Adrian gave a small nod toward 3 empty spaces farther down the row. There's one right there. That's not the point. It seems like the point. Her sunglasses came off. She looked him over from his shoes to his face, and something in her expression changed. It wasn't the parking space anymore. Adrian recognized that change. He had seen versions of it in airports, hotels, restaurants, neighborhoods, and once inside the lobby of a building where his own name had been printed on the event program upstairs. The first assumption had already been made. Now she was searching for facts that would justify it. You don't have to get smart with me. I answered your question.
No, you got an attitude. Adrian closed the rear door. I parked in an open space. I'm going inside.
He turned toward the store. Don't walk away from me. He stopped. Not because she ordered him to. Because her voice had changed enough that people nearby were looking. A man loading bottled water into a pickup glanced over. A teenager pushing carts slowed down. The woman took 2 more steps. I'm talking to you. Adrian faced her again. And I'm telling you this isn't a problem unless you decide to make it one. She stared at him. That should have ended the conversation. Instead, a second voice came from behind the SUV. What's going on? A man walked around the front of the vehicle carrying 2 paper shopping bags. He was broad through the chest, maybe mid-50s, with grey at his temples and a golf pullover zipped halfway to his neck. The woman pointed at Adrian before the man had even reached her. He stole the spot and then started getting aggressive. Adrian said nothing. The man put the bags in the SUV. You bother my wife? No, he did. The woman cut in fast. He got right in my face. Adrian looked at the distance between them. More than 6 feet. The man looked at Adrian. She says you got in her face. She can say whatever she wants. You calling her a liar? Adrian's voice stayed level. I'm saying I didn't get in anybody's face. The man stepped closer. Now the distance was 3 feet. Adrian didn't move. The man's name, Adrian would learn later, was Grant Holloway. His wife was Marlene. At that moment, those names meant nothing. What mattered was Grant's posture. Chin forward, hands loose but not relaxed. Weight shifted slightly onto the balls of his feet. Adrian had spent most of his adult life reading body language before other people realized they were giving anything away. Grant wanted a confrontation. Maybe not a fight, but something he could win in public. You need to apologize, no. Grant blinked. Adrian kept his voice calm. Your wife wanted the parking space. I didn't know that. There's nothing else to discuss. You people always think you can just do whatever you want. There it was. Marlene didn't correct him. She folded her arms. Adrian looked at Grant for 1 second longer. What people? Grant's face shifted. Not guilt. Annoyance. Like Adrian had violated an unwritten rule by making him hear his own sentence. You know exactly what I mean. No, I want you to say it. Marlene stepped in. Oh, don't start that. Adrian looked at her. Start what? Turning everything into race. I didn't mention race. Her lips parted. That landed. The cart attendant had stopped completely now. The man by the pickup had taken his phone out. though Adrian couldn't tell if he was recording or checking a message. Grant pointed toward Adrian's car. You even supposed to be parking here? Adrian looked at the painted space again. It's a public lot. I mean this area, what area? Grant glanced toward the storefronts. Westbridge Market shared the lot with a wine shop, a Pilates studio, a private bank branch, and a high-end kitchen store. Adrian almost smiled. He understood the question now. Grant wanted him to explain why he belonged there. Adrian wasn't going to. Marlene took out her phone. Call security. There isn't security, Grant said. Then I'm calling the police. Adrian's gaze settled on the phone. You're calling the police over a parking space. It's not about the parking space anymore. Then what is it about? Marlene looked at him. For half a second she seemed to understand the trap inside his question. Then pride pushed her through it. It's about the way you're behaving. Adrian glanced at Grant, who had moved closer than before. I'm standing next to my own car. You've been threatening us.
No, I haven't. Grant laughed once. Come on, man.
Don't play games. Adrian's jaw shifted. He didn't like being called man in that tone. Not because of rank, not because of age. Because Grant was using it the way some people used boy without saying boy. Still, Adrian kept his hands visible. Move away from me. Grant looked surprised. What? You're the one closing distance. Step back. Grant smiled. Or what? Adrian didn't answer. Marlene had already placed the call.
Yes, hi. I need an officer at Westbridge Market.
Adrian closed his eyes for one brief second. Then he opened them and looked directly at her. Marlene turned slightly away while speaking, but kept watching him. There's a man here harassing us. Adrian's expression changed. Barely, but enough that Marlene saw it that had not happened. She continued. He's refusing to leave us alone. Adrian spoke just loud enough for the phone to catch him. Tell them there's video in the parking lot. Marlene's eyes snapped toward him. Grant said quit talking while she's on the phone. Adrian looked up. A black dome camera was mounted beneath the awning above the grocery store entrance. Another camera faced the lot from the bank. Marlene followed his eyes. Her voice faltered for half a beat, then she recovered. Yes, we're still here. Adrian took out his own phone. Grant's posture changed immediately. What are you doing? Recording. You don't have permission to record my wife. We're standing in a public parking lot. Put the phone down. No, Grant stepped toward him. Adrian moved back once. Not from fear. To keep distance. The motion mattered because the parking lot camera would see it. Grant noticed. You trying to make me look like the bad guy? I'm not making you do anything. Marlene lowered her phone. They're coming. Adrian tapped his screen and started a video. He held the phone chest high, not shoved toward anyone. Good. Marlene's eyebrows rose. Good. If you're telling the truth, police should help you. Grant stared at him. For the first time, the confidence in his face thinned. Not much. Adrian saw it. Marlene didn't. She pointed at his phone. He's filming us now. Grant said, put it away. Adrian looked at him. No. You're escalating this. You walked toward me twice. Grant's nostrils flared. The teenager with the carts had moved closer to the entrance. An older woman leaving the store stopped beside him. Nobody wanted to be involved, but nobody was leaving either. That was how these scenes changed. 1 minute it was private. The next minute everyone became a witness by accident. Adrian looked at his phone screen. 12:37. His mother expected him back before 1. He considered calling his sister, then decided against it. There was no reason to worry her yet. That decision would bother him later. A siren sounded somewhere beyond the shopping center. Marlene's shoulders relaxed. Grant gave Adrian a look that said the arrival of police had already settled the matter. Adrian noticed that too. A marked Fairfax County cruiser turned into the lot, then another. The first stopped behind Adrian's sedan. The second angled across the driving lane. Adrian didn't like the placement. It trapped his car between the cruiser and the row of parked vehicles. 2 officers got out. The senior one moved fast, mid-40s, close-cropped hair, broad shoulders. His badge caught the sun as he approached. The younger officer stayed several paces back. Her body camera showed a small red light. The senior officer looked at Marlene first. Who called? I did. She immediately stepped toward him. Thank God. Adrian lowered his phone slightly but kept recording. Marlene pointed. That's him. The officer's head turned. His right hand settled near his holster. Sir, put the phone down. Adrian didn't move. Am I being detained? I said, put the phone down. Am I being detained? The officer's expression changed. It wasn't a difficult question, but he didn't like being asked it. Keep your hands where I can see them, they are. The phone was in Adrian's right hand. His left hand was open at his side. The younger officer approached from an angle. "Sir, just keep the phone visible?" Adrian nodded once. "That's what I'm doing." The senior officer looked back toward Marlene. "Tell me what happened." She started with the parking spot, then skipped ahead. He got aggressive. Grant jumped in. He kept coming toward us. Adrian watched the younger officer. She was looking at Grant's position relative to him, then at the lot, then at Adrian's phone. She was listening differently. The senior officer wasn't. "He threatened you?" Marlene hesitated. Grant answered for her. "Absolutely," Adrian spoke. "What was the threat?" The senior officer turned.
I'm not talking to you right now.
"You're asking whether I threatened them. I said I'm not talking to you."
Adrian's eyebrows rose slightly. "Then you're only investigating one side."
That drew the officer toward him. "What's your name?" "Adrian Cole, identification."
My wallet is in my back right pocket.
"Don't reach for it. I wasn't going to." The younger officer stepped closer. "I can retrieve it if you're comfortable with that." Adrian looked at her. "That's fine." She moved slowly. Professional. Wallet? Back right pocket. She removed it and stepped away before opening it. The senior officer kept staring at Adrian. "You live around here? Does that matter?" "Answer the question." "I live in Virginia." "That's not what I asked." Adrian's mouth tightened. Grant folded his arms, clearly enjoying the direction of things. Marlene stood beside him with the satisfied posture of someone watching authority confirm what she had already decided. The younger officer opened Adrian's wallet. Driver's license. "Credit cards. A medical insurance card. Nothing else." Adrian had deliberately left his military credentials in the locked center console. He didn't carry them on every personal errand. He had learned years ago that once people saw rank, conversations stopped being honest. Sometimes that was useful. Sometimes it wasn't. Today, standing beside his car while a police officer treated a parking dispute like a threat investigation, Adrian wanted honesty. He wanted to see where procedure went when nobody thought he mattered. The senior officer stepped closer. "You got any weapons on you?" "Any weapons in the vehicle?" Adrian paused. There was a secured handgun in a locked case inside the trunk. Legally stored. Registered. He had been at a range the previous afternoon with his nephew and hadn't transferred the case back to his safe yet. There's a lawfully stored firearm locked in the trunk. Everything changed. Grant looked at Marlene. Marlene's eyes widened. The senior officer's hand moved fully onto his holster. The younger officer looked at Adrian. "You said it's locked?" "In a case, in the trunk." The senior officer cut her off.
Turn around. Adrian's gaze moved to him. "Why? You just confirmed there's a firearm in the vehicle."
"In a locked trunk. Turn around." Adrian didn't. The officer's voice lowered. "Don't make this difficult." Adrian looked at the man's body camera. No red light. He looked at the younger officer. Hers was recording. "Is your camera on?" The officer stared at him. "What?" "Your body camera. Turn around." Adrian's voice stayed calm. "Officer, is your body camera recording?" The younger officer looked at her partner. That look told Adrian enough. The senior officer took another step. Last warning. Adrian slipped his phone into his shirt pocket. Camera still running, lens pointed outward. Then he turned around. The cuffs went on hard. Too tight. Grant exhaled. Marlene whispered, "I knew it." Adrian looked over his shoulder. "You knew what?" The senior officer pulled his arms higher. Face forward, Adrian obeyed. The metal bit into his wrists. The younger officer came closer. "Can you loosen those one notch?" Her partner looked at her. "They're fine." Adrian flexed his fingers. "They're cutting circulation." I said they're fine. The younger officer's jaw tightened. A small thing. But Adrian noticed. He noticed everything now. The missing body camera light, the trapped position of his sedan, the officer refusing to ask Marlene for the specific threat. Grant's story changing from Adrian, bothering his wife, to Adrian approaching both of them. And the fact that the officer had heard the word firearm and stopped investigating everything that happened before it. The senior officer took Adrian's keys from his pocket. Adrian turned his head. "I don't consent to a search." "I'm securing the weapon." "You can secure the scene without searching the car." "I don't need legal advice. I'm not giving you legal advice." The officer clicked the unlock button. Adrian's sedan flashed. Grant smiled. Marlene looked at the small crowd near the entrance and straightened her jacket. She believed this had become proof. Not just that she was right, that she had been right from the beginning. The younger officer moved toward her partner. "Sergeant, so that was his rank." The sergeant kept walking. "Not now." The caller never reported seeing a weapon. He stopped. Marlene's face changed. The younger officer continued. Dispatch said verbal dispute, no weapon mentioned. Grant spoke fast. We didn't know about the gun until just now. The sergeant looked at Adrian. Adrian said nothing. The sergeant's eyes moved toward the trunk, then back to the crowd. Then to Marlene. He had been given a clean exit. Everyone there could feel it. Verify the original call. Review the parking lot cameras. Loosen the cuffs. Slow the situation down. Instead, he turned to the younger officer. He admitted, there's a gun in the car, locked in the trunk. He was accused of threatening them. She hasn't described a threat. The sergeant's voice hardened. Officer, secure the scene. The younger officer went quiet. Adrian heard that silence for what it was. A relationship had just changed. The sergeant opened the driver's door. Adrian spoke once. Sergeant, the man looked back. Adrian held his gaze.
You've had 3 chances to check the story before touching that car.
The sergeant stared at him. You're in handcuffs. You're not running this stop. No. Adrian looked toward the glowing red on the younger officer's camera. But somebody's recording it. For the first time, the sergeant looked directly at her body camera. His expression tightened. Then he reached into Adrian's vehicle and opened the center console. The sergeant opened Adrian's center console with the confidence of a man who had already decided the search was justified. Inside were 2 charging cables, a folded pair of reading glasses, a pack of mints, and a black leather credential case. The sergeant stopped. Not for long, but long enough for the younger officer to notice. Adrian saw the pause in the reflection of the driver's window. That doesn't authorize you to keep searching, he said. The sergeant picked up the credential case. What's this? You opened it, you tell me. Don't get cute. I'm handcuffed in a grocery store parking lot because 2 strangers argued over a parking space. I'm not the one making this complicated. Grant muttered something under his breath. Marlene said louder, he's been like this the whole time. The younger officer turned toward her. Ma'am, please don't interrupt. Marlene looked offended. The sergeant opened the case. His eyes moved across the identification inside, then back again. Adrian watched his expression. The sergeant understood that the card mattered. He just didn't understand how much. What branch? Army. You active? The sergeant looked up. What do you do? Adrian's answer came without hesitation. I'm an officer. The sergeant gave a short laugh. Obviously. Adrian said nothing. The younger officer stepped closer, trying to see the credential without reaching for it. Sergeant, can I take a look? I've got it. She stopped. The red light on her body camera remained steady. The sergeant closed the credential wallet and set it on the passenger's seat. Then he kept searching. Adrian's voice changed. Not louder. Sharper. You're past the scope of securing a firearm. The sergeant pulled open the glove compartment. You're detained during a weapons investigation. There was no weapons complaint. You admitted there's a gun.
After you asked me, Grant stepped forward. He was threatening us before you got here.
The younger officer turned. Sir, what exactly did he say? Grant looked at her. What words did he use? He was aggressive. That's not what I asked. Marlene cut in. He kept getting closer. Adrian looked over his shoulder.
No, the sergeant pointed toward him, face forward.
Adrian did. The younger officer kept her eyes on Grant. What did he say that you took as a threat? Grant's mouth opened, then closed. Marlene stepped in again. He didn't need to say it. The younger officer's expression shifted. What does that mean? You could tell what? Marlene looked at Adrian, then at the officer. That something was off. Adrian almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because after all the certainty, that was what the story had become. Something was off. The sergeant found the trunk release. Adrian heard the click, his head turned. I told you I don't consent. The trunk popped open. The sergeant walked around the rear of the sedan. The younger officer followed him halfway, then stopped.
Sergeant, he didn't answer. The firearm is already secured in a locked case.
He looked back, and I need to verify that. You can verify the case is secured without opening everything else. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. You want to run this stop? No. Her voice stayed respectful. But the original call didn't include a weapon. We only know about it because he disclosed it. The sergeant stared at her. Adrian could see the choice happening. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. A choice. The sergeant had an exit again. He could slow down. He could call a supervisor. He could review the caller's statement. He could even admit he'd moved too fast. Instead, he said, if you have a problem with my scene management, we can discuss it after. Then he opened the trunk. The gun case was exactly where Adrian had said it would be.
Black polymer. 2 locks.
Range tag still looped through the handle. The sergeant tugged once. Locked. The younger officer looked at him. Secured, he didn't answer. Grant said, "How do we know that's the only one?" Adrian turned his head. The sergeant's gaze went to Grant. That was the moment Adrian understood something worse was happening. The sergeant wasn't just investigating. He was letting the couple help define what counted as suspicious. Adrian said, "Because I answered the question you asked." The sergeant looked back at the trunk. A range bag sat beside the case. He unzipped it. Ear protection, paper targets, a cleaning kit, a box of ammunition. The sergeant picked up the ammunition. Marlene made a sound behind them. "Oh my God." Adrian closed his eyes for a second. The younger officer said, "Ma'am, please step back." Marlene ignored her. He brought ammunition to a grocery store. Adrian looked at her. It was in the trunk from yesterday. "You expect us to believe that?" "I don't care what you believe." The sergeant turned. "What's your tone?" Adrian looked straight at him. "My tone isn't evidence. That landed harder than shouting would have." The sergeant put the ammunition back in the bag. Then he closed the trunk. For a moment, Adrian thought the worst of the search was over. He was wrong. The sergeant walked directly to his cruiser, opened the passenger door, and reached for a clipboard. The younger officer followed. "What are you doing?" "Documenting the detention." "As what?" He looked at her.
Possible menacing. Possible disorderly conduct. Firearm involved.
She stared. The firearm wasn't involved. He had access to one. It was locked in the trunk. The sergeant lowered his voice. Adrian couldn't hear every word from where he stood, but he caught enough. "Stop arguing with me in front of the subject." The younger officer's shoulders went rigid. "Then let's talk away from him." They moved behind the cruiser. That was the first moment Adrian couldn't see the sergeant's face. The sergeant leaned close to her. "You think calm means safe?" "No. You think every guy who knows how to say the right words is harmless?" "No." "Then stop letting him control the frame." The younger officer looked toward Adrian. "He isn't controlling the frame. The facts are." The sergeant's jaw tightened. "You're 26 years old. That doesn't change the call. It changes how much you've seen." She didn't answer. The sergeant turned away from her and pulled out his phone. He made a call. His body camera was still dark. Adrian watched him through the cruiser windows. The sergeant spoke with one hand over his other ear.
"Yeah, I've got a subject detained on a disturbance."
A pause. Male armed vehicle. Adrian's expression hardened. The sergeant continued. Caller reported threatening behavior.
Subject's argumentative, military ID in the car. Another pause. "No, I don't know what level. He looked through the windshield at Adrian." "Exactly. That's why I'm calling." The younger officer stood several feet away.
She heard it too. The call was being framed before anyone higher up heard the first honest version. That was not a mistake. That was strategy. The sergeant ended the call and stepped back out. "Supervisor's coming," Adrian nodded. "Good." The sergeant looked annoyed by the answer. Marlene approached. "So are you arresting him?" The younger officer turned sharply. "No one said that." Grant looked at the sergeant. "Because if you're not, I don't understand what we're doing here." Adrian looked at him. Grant didn't like that. "What?" Adrian said, "You called police, my wife did. You backed her story." "Because it's true. Then you should want them to verify it." Grant's mouth tightened. Marlene said, "We don't owe you anything." Adrian looked at her. "You told police I threatened you." "I said you were aggressive. Your husband said I threatened you." Grant stepped forward. "I heard the way you talked to her." The younger officer raised a hand. "Sir, stay where you are." Grant stopped. Adrian looked at the couple. "One of you says I approached you. One says I followed you. One says I threatened you. But neither of you can say what I said." Marlene's face flushed. "Because it was your behavior." "Which behavior?" "You were intimidating." "How?" She stared at him. Adrian waited. Grant answered instead. "You know what you're doing." Adrian gave him a long look. "That's the first honest thing you've said." Grant's face darkened. The sergeant stepped between them. "Enough." He turned to Adrian. "You're going in the back of the cruiser until the supervisor gets here." "Why?" "Because this scene is getting heated." Adrian looked at Grant, who had been the one stepping forward. Then at the sergeant. "You're putting me in the car because he keeps approaching me?" "I'm putting you in the car because you're detained." "On what legal basis?" The sergeant's face went flat. "Turn around." Adrian was already cuffed. He did not move. The sergeant came closer. "Don't make me repeat myself." Adrian looked at the younger officer's body camera. Then back at him. I want the record clear. I'm not resisting.
I'm asking why I'm being transported into a patrol car after your search found exactly what I told you it would find.
The sergeant leaned in. I don't care how many courtroom phrases you know. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Courtroom phrases? You've been narrating this whole thing like you're building a case. Adrian gave him a tired look. Maybe you should ask yourself why it sounds like one. The sergeant opened the rear cruiser door. Adrian got in. The cuffs made the movement awkward. He sat sideways first, then brought his legs inside. The door shut. For the first time since the argument began, glass separated him from everyone else. The parking lot looked different from the back seat of a police car. People looked longer. Some pretended not to. The teenager with the carts stood near the entrance. A manager had come outside. Grant was talking with the sergeant. Marlene was pointing toward Adrian's sedan. The younger officer stood apart from them. Then she looked directly at Adrian. She touched 2 fingers near her body camera. Not enough to be obvious. Enough that Adrian understood. Still recording, he gave the smallest nod. 5 minutes passed. Then 7. The heat built inside the cruiser despite the air conditioning. Adrian flexed his fingers. His right hand was starting to numb. He leaned forward slightly. The younger officer noticed and approached the car. She opened the front passenger door and spoke through the partition. Are the cuffs still too tight? Yes. She looked toward the sergeant. He was speaking with Grant. She opened Adrian's rear door. I'm going to check the fit. Thank you. She slipped 1 finger beneath the cuff. Her expression changed. These are too tight. She loosened both sides. Adrian rotated his wrists. But yes. She hesitated. Do you need medical? No, all right. She started to close the door. Adrian said, Officer. She looked back. Ask the store manager to preserve the exterior cameras before they overwrite. Her eyes sharpened. You know they overwrite. Most commercial systems cycle. Could be days, could be hours. She nodded. Anything else?
Preserve the 911 call. It's already recorded. Preserve the CAD notes, too.
That made her study him. You're not guessing, no. She glanced toward the sergeant. Who are you? Adrian looked through the windshield. Right now, I'm the guy in your back seat. She almost smiled. Almost. Then the manager came across the lot. He was holding a tablet. The younger officer intercepted him. They spoke near the front of the cruiser. The manager pointed toward the awning camera, then toward the bank. The younger officer asked another question. The manager looked at Adrian, then at Marlene, then back at the tablet. Marlene saw the exchange and walked over. What is that? The manager held the tablet closer to his chest. Security footage. Her face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Grant came over. What footage? The younger officer said, the parking lot.
Marlene laughed too quickly. Then, you'll see exactly what happened.
The manager looked at her. I already did. Silence. Grant's head turned. What do you mean? The manager looked toward the younger officer instead of answering him. The camera over the entrance caught most of it. The sergeant walked over. Can you show me? The manager unlocked the tablet. Adrian couldn't see the screen from the cruiser. He watched faces instead. That was enough. The younger officer's expression stayed focused. The sergeant's became still. Grant leaned in. Marlene stopped breathing for half a second. The manager scrubbed backward. Then forward, he pointed. The younger officer said something. The sergeant answered. Grant's arms unfolded. Marlene said, that's not the whole thing. The manager looked at her. It's 12 minutes, there's no audio.
No, then you can't know what he said.
Adrian leaned back against the seat. There it was. The story had shifted again. First he approached them. Then he followed them. Then he threatened them. Now the video didn't matter because it lacked audio. The sergeant handed the tablet back. Send me a copy. The manager nodded. Marlene said, but you can see him standing there. The younger officer looked at her. We can also see your husband approaching him 3 times. Grant frowned. I was protecting my wife. The younger officer continued. We can see, General. She stopped. Everyone looked at her. Adrian's eyes sharpened. She hadn't meant to say that word. The sergeant turned. What did you just say? The younger officer looked embarrassed. I said the subject. No, you didn't. She glanced toward Adrian, then toward the credential wallet, still visible on the passenger seat of his sedan. I may have misread something. The sergeant walked toward her. What? She lowered her voice. The ID you pulled from the console. I saw rank information. Marlene looked between them. What rank? The sergeant snapped. Mom, step back. She didn't. What rank? Grant's face had changed now. Not fear, calculation. Adrian saw him thinking through the possibilities.
Colonel Major. Maybe someone important enough to make the police cautious.
Grant still didn't understand. Neither did the sergeant. The younger officer said, "I want dispatch to verify the military credential." The sergeant stared at her. "I already called a supervisor." "That's not the same thing. You're done freelancing." She held his gaze. "Then order me not to verify an identification document on camera." The sergeant looked directly at the red light on her chest. For the first time, he had no immediate answer. The younger officer walked to her cruiser. She keyed the radio.
Dispatch. I need assistance confirming a Department of Defense credential.
The response came back through static. "Go ahead." She read Adrian's full name, date of birth, then paused over the credential. "Rank field appears to read general." The parking lot went quiet around her. Dispatch asked, "Repeat rank." The younger officer looked at the card again. "General." The sergeant stepped closer. "Let me see that." She held up one hand. "Stand by." Dispatch responded. "Do you have branch?" "United States Army." A longer pause. The sergeant looked toward Adrian in the cruiser. Adrian looked back. Marlene whispered something to Grant. Grant shook his head. "This is ridiculous." The younger officer continued. "Requesting confirmation only." Dispatch said, "Copy." Then nothing. 30 seconds passed. The sergeant paced once. Twice, he looked at Adrian, then at his phone, then toward the road. Marlene crossed her arms again, rebuilding confidence from silence. "People buy fake IDs." The younger officer looked at her. "Nobody asked you." Marlene's mouth dropped open. Grant stepped forward. "Hey." The younger officer faced him. "Stay back." Grant stopped. The sergeant walked toward his cruiser. The radio cracked. "Unit 12, stand by for supervisor traffic." The younger officer picked it up. Standing by, another voice came on. "Not dispatch, a lieutenant. Confirm subject name Adrian Michael Cole." Adrian heard it through the closed cruiser door. The younger officer answered. "Confirmed." The lieutenant said, "Do not broadcast additional personal information over open channel." The sergeant stopped moving. The younger officer looked at him. "Copy." "Is the subject currently restrained?" She looked at Adrian.
Yes. The lieutenant's answer came faster. Why?
The sergeant reached for the radio. "I have the scene." The younger officer handed it over. "This is Sergeant with Unit 12. Subject detained during a threat investigation involving a reported disturbance and a firearm." The lieutenant was silent. Then, was a firearm used or displayed?
No. Was a firearm reported by the caller?
The sergeant looked toward Marlene.
No. It was disclosed during questioning. Another pause.
"Any criminal act observed by officers?" The sergeant's face tightened. "We're still investigating. Then why is he cuffed?" The sergeant looked around the parking lot. People were watching. "The manager, the cart attendant."
Grant. Marlene, the younger officer.
"Adrian."
The sergeant lowered his voice. Officer safety.
The lieutenant said, "Remove the restraints unless you have an articulable basis to continue detention." Marlene stared. Grant took one step toward the sergeant. "What the hell?" The younger officer moved to Adrian's door before the sergeant answered. He held up a hand. "Wait." She stopped. The lieutenant came over the radio again. "Sergeant, did you copy?" The sergeant's face went hard. "Copy." The younger officer opened Adrian's door. "Sir, I'm removing the cuffs." Adrian stepped out. She unlocked one wrist, then the other. Circulation returned in a sharp burn. Adrian rubbed the marks once. The sergeant approached. "You're still part of an active investigation." Adrian looked at him. "Am I free to leave?" The sergeant hesitated. The lieutenant was still on the radio. The younger officer said nothing. The sergeant answered, "Not yet." Adrian's expression changed. "Then state the basis." The sergeant's jaw tightened. The lieutenant's voice came through again. "Sergeant, put me on speaker!" The younger officer activated the external speaker on the radio.
The lieutenant addressed Adrian. "Sir, this is Lieutenant Harris with Fairfax County Police."
"We're verifying identification and reviewing the call." "You're not under arrest?" Adrian looked at the sergeant. "That's not what I asked." The lieutenant paused. Adrian continued. "Am I legally detained?" The lieutenant answered more carefully. "At this moment, I'm directing the scene supervisor to complete immediate verification and determine whether continued detention is supported." Adrian nodded once. Understood. That answer told him two things. The lieutenant knew enough to be cautious, and not enough to understand the entire problem yet. The younger officer's computer chimed. She looked through the open driver's door of her cruiser. A message had appeared on the terminal. She read it once. Then again, her face lost color, the sergeant noticed. "What?" She didn't answer. He walked over. "What is it?" She turned the screen slightly. Adrian couldn't see the message. The sergeant could. His shoulders stiffened. Grant whispered, "What now?" Marlene looked toward Adrian. For the first time since the horn, she looked uncertain. The younger officer picked up the radio. "Dispatch, confirm the secure return is correct." "Affirmative," she swallowed. "4-star?" The sergeant closed his eyes. Marlene said, "What did she say?" Nobody answered her. Grant walked closer. "4-star what?" The younger officer looked at Adrian, then at the sergeant. The lieutenant's voice came over the speaker. "Sergeant, I need you to listen very carefully. The subject you've detained is General Adrian Cole, United States Army, active duty, 4-star rank." Grant's face emptied. Marlene stared at Adrian as if the clothes on his body had changed. They hadn't. Same navy polo, same tan pants, same marks around his wrists, same grocery list still folded in his pocket. The sergeant looked at the open trunk, then the credential case, then the body camera he had never turned on. The younger officer's red light was still recording. Marlene finally found her voice. "That's impossible." Adrian looked at her. "Why?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Grant stepped in. "Hold on."
So what? Being a general doesn't mean he wasn't aggressive.
Adrian's eyes shifted toward him. Grant kept going. "You don't get special treatment because you're military." Adrian nodded. "You're right." Grant stopped. That was not the answer he expected. Adrian looked toward the sergeant. "I don't want special treatment." Then he looked at Marlene. "I want the same investigation you should have done before putting me in cuffs." The younger officer lowered her eyes for a moment. The sergeant's phone started ringing. He looked at the screen. His supervisor. He didn't answer immediately. Adrian watched him. The sergeant had another choice, maybe the biggest one yet. Answer honestly. Admit what had happened. Preserve the footage. Correct the report before a single lie hardened into paperwork. The phone rang a second time. The sergeant answered. "Yes, sir." He turned away from the group. Adrian could still hear enough.
No, the scene is under control.
Pause, yes.
Identity confirmed. Another pause. The sergeant looked at the younger officer, then at the grocery store camera, then at Marlene and Grant. His voice dropped.
"The problem is the stop may look worse on video than it actually was."
Adrian's eyes narrowed. The younger officer heard it too. The sergeant continued.
I need a few minutes before anyone sends footage anywhere.
The younger officer took one step toward him. The sergeant turned farther away. "No, sir, I'm not saying destroy anything." A pause.
"I'm saying we need to control what leaves the scene until reports are complete."
Adrian stopped rubbing his wrists. There it was. The next line crossed. Not the parking space assumption. Not the cuffs. Not the search. Not even the false framing of the firearm. This one was different. This was what happened after the truth became inconvenient. The younger officer walked toward the store manager. "Do not send that security video to anyone from the department unless you receive a formal preservation request." The sergeant spun around. "What did you just say?" She faced him. "I said preserve the original. I told you I'm handling evidence, and I'm making sure it stays evidence." The sergeant stared at her.
Grant whispered to Marlene, "We need to leave."
Adrian heard him. Marlene grabbed her purse. The younger officer turned. "Nobody leaves yet." Grant's face hardened. "We aren't under arrest." "No. Then we're leaving." The younger officers looked at the sergeant. He hesitated. Marlene saw the hesitation and started toward the SUV. Adrian spoke. "Officer." The younger officer looked at him. The original 911 call, she understood immediately. If Marlene left now, the call still existed, the video still existed, the body camera still existed. The stories could move. The evidence couldn't. The younger officer keyed her radio. "Dispatch, place an evidentiary hold on the original 911 audio and CAD history for this call." The sergeant stepped toward her. "Cancel that." She looked at him.
"Why? Because I'm the scene supervisor. Then give me the reason on camera."
The sergeant stopped. Marlene stopped walking. Grant stopped beside her. Adrian stood in the middle of the parking lot with red marks around both wrists. No uniform, no stars visible, no entourage. But everyone there understood the balance had shifted. Not because of the rank, because the first honest record of the afternoon was finally becoming harder to control. The sergeant looked toward Adrian. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a suspicious man. He was looking at a witness. And Adrian knew, from the way the sergeant's eyes settled on the cameras, that the man wasn't finished fighting. The sergeant's counterattack started before the lieutenant even reached the parking lot. He walked straight to the younger officer and held out his hand. "Body camera." "What for?" "Evidence review." It's still recording, I'm aware. Then it stays on. His face hardened. You're relieved from active handling of this scene until a supervisor gets here. She glanced toward Adrian. The sergeant noticed. Don't! She looked back at him. Don't what? Turn this into some moral performance because you think you spotted a mistake before I did. Her voice dropped. This stopped being a mistake when you told your supervisor the video looked worse than what happened. Grant and Marlene were close enough to hear that. Grant said, "Can we leave or not?" The sergeant snapped, "Stay where you are." Then he turned back to the younger officer. "Give me the camera." No. That single word changed the air more than shouting would have. The sergeant's hand stayed out. She reached for her radio instead.
Lieutenant, I need you to know I've been ordered to surrender an active body camera before the scene review is complete.
Static. Then the lieutenant answered. Do not deactivate or surrender any recording device. I'm 2 minutes out. The sergeant lowered his hand. Adrian watched his face. There it was again. Another exit. Another chance to stop. The sergeant looked toward Adrian and chose something else. You enjoying this? Adrian's expression barely moved.
No, you look pretty comfortable. I've spent 30 years standing in rooms where people made bad decisions under pressure.
The sergeant stepped closer.
And you think that makes you better than everybody here? No, Adrian glanced toward the cameras. I think it makes excuses easier to recognize.
The lieutenant arrived less than 3 minutes later in an unmarked county vehicle. He didn't greet anyone. He walked first to the younger officer, confirmed her camera was active, then to the store manager, then to Adrian. General Cole, Lieutenant.
I'm going to ask everyone to stay separated while I sort out what happened.
Adrian nodded. That would have been useful 40 minutes ago. The lieutenant took the hit without reacting. He turned toward the sergeant.
Walk with me? They moved behind the second cruiser.
This time, the sergeant did not lower his voice enough. You're letting Rank distort the scene. The lieutenant stopped. I haven't asked him one question about Rank. You came running because dispatch said 4-star. I came because one of my sergeants detained a man over a disturbance call, searched his vehicle after the alleged weapon turned out to be a locked firearm. He disclosed himself, and apparently failed to activate his camera. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. I had officer safety concerns. Then document them I will? Good. Start with why your camera is off. The sergeant looked down at it. My battery's been unreliable. The younger officer's head turned. Adrian saw it. The lieutenant saw it too. When did you notice this morning? Did you report it? The sergeant hesitated. That was answer enough. The lieutenant said, Don't touch the device. I want it checked exactly as it is. For the first time, the sergeant looked less angry than worried. Marlene stepped toward the lieutenant.
Excuse me, but while everyone is obsessing over the police, we're the ones who called because we felt threatened.
The lieutenant faced her. I'll take your statement. I already gave one, you'll give another. Grant folded his arms. This is getting ridiculous. The lieutenant pointed toward the far side of the SUV. You stand there. Your wife stays here. You don't answer for each other. Grant's face tightened. You can't separate married people like suspects. I can separate witnesses so I can compare their accounts. That shut him up. Adrian stood near his sedan while the younger officer returned his credential case. She held it out with both hands, sir. Adrian took it. Thank you. She looked at the red marks on his wrists. I should have pushed harder sooner. Adrian closed the credential case. You pushed when the facts stopped matching the story. Not at first. No. She looked down. He continued. Remember that part, the lieutenant began with Marlene. What exactly did General Cole say that made you believe you were in danger? Marlene looked toward Adrian. The lieutenant said, Don't look at him. Tell me he was hostile. What words? He kept challenging me. What words? Marlene's voice sharpened. He said I was making it about race. Adrian's eyebrows rose. The cart attendant looked toward the store manager. The manager looked at his tablet. The lieutenant asked, Did he mention race first? Marlene hesitated. Grant called from 10 yards as She doesn't remember every word. The lieutenant turned. I told you not to answer for her. Grant threw up his hands. Marlene tried again. He was confrontational. The lieutenant wrote something down. Did he approach you?
Yes. From across the lot, Grant said. She approached him first.
Marlene spun toward her husband. What? Grant realized too late what he had done. I mean, after that, the lieutenant looked from one to the other. Stay separated. Then he questioned Grant. Grant's version lasted 4 minutes. In his account, Adrian had taken the parking space deliberately, refused to apologize, stared Marlene down. followed them toward their SUV, and made Grant believe a confrontation was imminent. The lieutenant asked, "Did he threaten to hurt either of you?" "Not in those words. Did he display a weapon?" "No." "Did you see a weapon?" "No." "Did your wife?" Grant paused. "She said she thought he had something." The lieutenant looked toward Marlene. Adrian saw her look away. Then dispatch called the lieutenant directly. "Supervisor, preserved 911 audio is available." The lieutenant looked at the younger officer. "Can we play it here?" She retrieved the audio through the cruiser terminal. Marlene moved toward them. "What is that?" "The call you placed?" Her face went still. The first 20 seconds sounded exactly like her earlier account. A parking dispute, an aggressive man, a claim that he would not leave them alone. Then her voice became quieter. There was wind, a passing car. Grant in the background. At first his words were hard to make out. The younger officer increased the volume. Grant's voice came through. "Tell them you think he's got something." Marlene whispered, "I don't know if he does." Grant answered, "Doesn't matter. Say you're worried he might." Nobody moved. Then the recording played Marlene speaking clearly to the dispatcher. "I think he might have something in his waistband." The lieutenant stopped the audio. Marlene's face had gone white. Grant took a step backward. Adrian said nothing. The lieutenant looked at the couple. "Was that your voice?" Grant answered first. "You're taking that out of context." The lieutenant looked at him. "What context makes that better?"
We were scared. Marlene nodded fast. "Yes."
"We were scared." The lieutenant restarted the recording. A second background exchange came through before the call ended. Marlene said, "He hasn't even come over here." Grant answered, "He will if you let him." The lieutenant paused the audio again. The parking lot seemed smaller now. Adrian looked at Marlene, not angry, not triumphant. "Just direct. You knew I hadn't approached you." Marlene crossed her arms. "I knew how you were acting, no?" Adrian's voice stayed low. "You knew what happened. You decided what you wanted police to believe." Grant stepped toward him. "Don't lecture my wife." The younger officer moved between them. "Back up." Grant pointed past her.
"You think because he's some general, everybody has to pretend he wasn't intimidating?" Adrian looked at Grant. "This has nothing to do with my stars."
Grant laughed bitterly. "Of course it does. Nobody cared until they found out who you were." Adrian held his gaze. "That's exactly the problem." Grant stopped. Adrian "If I'd been an accountant, a mechanic, a teacher, or a kid home from college, your story would still have been false." The lieutenant watched him. Adrian pointed toward the cruiser. "The cuffs didn't become wrong when dispatch found my rank." Then he looked at the sergeant. "The search didn't become questionable because my credential made you nervous." The sergeant folded his arms. "You're not a lawyer." "No." Adrian took one step closer. "But I know what accountability looks like when somebody starts editing the truth after the fact." The sergeant's jaw tightened. "I didn't edit anything." The younger officer looked at him.
You called him argumentative before you told your supervisor the caller never reported a weapon.
The sergeant turned toward her. "You're done talking." The lieutenant stepped between them. "No, she isn't." The sergeant looked at his supervisor. "You taking her side now?" "I'm taking statements. You already decided what happened." The lieutenant's face stayed calm.
Then help me understand why you kept searching after you found the locked gun exactly where he said it was.
"Officer safety. Why was your camera off? I told you." "Why did you tell me we needed to control the footage before reports were complete?" The sergeant's expression changed. The lieutenant had heard more of the phone call than he realized. "I was trying to keep half a video from going online before anyone had context."
That isn't your job. It becomes my job when the department gets crucified over a clip that leaves out what officers knew.
Adrian spoke. "What did you know?" The sergeant faced him. "That there was a disturbance call. That 2 people said you were threatening. That you had a firearm in the car. That you were challenging every instruction." Adrian nodded once. "That almost sounds reasonable." The sergeant looked surprised. Adrian continued. "Until you add the parts you left out." He counted them without raising his hand. "The caller never reported a weapon until her husband coached her. The store video shows they approached me. The firearm was locked in the trunk. I told you it was there before you found it. Your officer told you the stories didn't match. And you had a camera that wasn't running." The sergeant's face hardened. "You think command experience means you understand street policing?" "No." Adrian's answer came fast. "I think command experience means I know exactly how dangerous it is when a person in authority starts protecting a decision instead of testing it." The sergeant opened his mouth. Adrian didn't let him escape into procedure. You had the chance to verify the call. A beat, you didn't. You had the chance to stop after the pat-down, found nothing. The sergeant stared at him. You didn't. You had the chance to stop when your officer told you the firearm wasn't part of the complaint. The younger officer looked at the ground. You didn't. Adrian's voice dropped. And after you found out who I was, you had one more chance to be honest about all of it. The sergeant looked toward the lieutenant. Adrian finished. You tried to control the video. For several seconds, the sergeant said nothing. Then he gave the closest thing he had to a defense.
You want the truth? Fine. I've worked this county 15 years.
I've had people smile in my face and pull guns 10 seconds later. I've had callers leave out details because they were scared.
I've had calm men turn violent the second they realized they weren't controlling the stop.
You came across like somebody who knew exactly how far he could push without technically crossing a line. Adrian listened. The sergeant continued. I made a judgment call. Adrian nodded. Yes. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. And if I'd done nothing and somebody got hurt, everybody here would be asking why I ignored the warning signs. That part I understand, the sergeant blinked. Adrian looked toward Marlene and Grant. What I don't accept is that you let their assumptions become your warning signs. The sergeant said nothing. That was the difference. Not caution, not officer safety, not even a bad first read. He had been given contradictory facts and kept choosing the version that justified what he had already done. The lieutenant ordered the sergeant to surrender his keys and remain off active duty pending review. It was not an arrest, it was not a firing, it was not a dramatic ending. And for Adrian, that mattered. Real accountability rarely arrived with music. Then the setback came. The county attorney called the lieutenant. The false report issue could not be resolved in the parking lot. The couple disputed intent. The security video had no audio. The 911 recording was damaging, but prosecutors would still need the full call, witness statements, and context before deciding whether Marlene had knowingly made a criminal false report. Grant immediately latched onto that. So we're free to go. The lieutenant looked at him. For now, Grant smiled without humor. Marlene reached for the SUV door. Adrian watched them. Part of him hated that they could leave. The cuffs were still marked on his wrists. His groceries were still unbought. His mother was still waiting. And the people who had started the entire chain were about to drive home. Younger officer came beside him. You okay? Adrian looked at the departing SUV. I don't like unfinished business. She nodded. Neither do I. He looked at her. She added, but unfinished isn't the same as buried. That changed something between them. Adrian studied her for a moment. What made you keep pushing? She looked toward her partner's dark body camera. I almost didn't. That's not what I asked.
She gave a tired half-smile.
My dad used to tell me that if two stories don't match, don't pick the one told by the person with the loudest voice. Adrian nodded. Good advice. I forgot it for about 5 minutes. Then you remembered. She looked at the cuff marks again. 5 minutes can do damage. Yes, she waited. Adrian said, so can the next 5 if you use them right. Her shoulders eased. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Write everything down while you still hate how it feels. She laughed once under her breath. Yes, sir. The lieutenant arranged for copies of the store footage, the body camera recording, the 911 audio, the dispatch logs, and the sergeant's equipment status to be preserved by separate evidence channels. Adrian gave a statement, then another. He refused an offer for an escort home. He also refused a press statement. When a local reporter arrived after someone posted a short parking lot clip online, Adrian gave her one sentence. Check the record before you check my rank. Then he went inside the store. The cinnamon pastries were almost sold out. He bought the last box. He also bought the coffee. By the time he reached his sister's house, his mother was sitting at the kitchen table with an ice pack over one knee and a look that told him she had already heard.
You're late. Adrian set the pastries down. Traffic.
She looked at his wrists. Traffic put handcuffs on you. He pulled out a chair, not exactly. She pushed the pastry box away. Sit. He did. For the first time that afternoon, nobody was asking him to explain himself before deciding whether they believed him. His mother touched one of the red marks. They know who you are? They do now. She looked up. That help? Adrian thought about the question. Too much. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means things changed fast when they heard the rank. She sat back. And you don't like that? No. You've worked your whole life for those stars. I didn't work for them, so a cop would suddenly remember the rules when he saw them. His mother looked at him for a long moment. Then she pulled the pastry box back. Good. Adrian almost smiled. That's all you've got? No, I've got a new hip and no patience. Eat. He laughed. The sound surprised him. She broke one pastry in half. You gonna let it go? No? You gonna make it about you? Adrian looked at her. No. She nodded. Then you know what to do. He did. The investigation took weeks, not hours. The store footage established that Marlene had approached Adrian first, and that Grant had repeatedly closed distance while Adrian backed away. The 911 recording established something more serious. The weapon suggestion had been introduced before either of them had seen any weapon, and Marlene admitted during the call that Adrian had not approached their SUV. The younger officer's body camera captured the sergeant being told those facts, ignoring them, opening the vehicle, and later discussing control of the footage. A technical inspection of his camera found no dead battery. It had been manually placed in standby before he walked toward Adrian. That did not prove every motive people online wanted it to prove, but it destroyed his simplest excuse. The department placed him on administrative leave during the investigation. Months later, he received a lengthy suspension, lost his supervisory assignment, and became the subject of a broader review of previous stops where his camera had been inactive during disputed searches. The younger officer was cleared of wrongdoing and later selected for an advanced field training role. Not because she had recognized a general, because she had challenged a supervisor while the outcome was still uncertain. Marlene's case went to prosecutors. The charge that survived review was not based on losing a parking spot. It was based on knowingly giving emergency dispatch information investigators believed she had no factual basis to claim. Grant was not charged simply for being offensive, but his recorded coaching became part of the case, and both of them faced civil claims tied to the incident. Their names became public for reasons neither had imagined when a horn first sounded across a grocery store lot. Adrian declined to pursue a personal media campaign. He did something harder. He met with county leadership, police trainers, civil rights representatives, and military family advocates and asked them to review how vague threat calls became high-risk detentions. His position opened the door. The evidence kept it open. The county eventually changed its dispatch checklist for unverified weapon claims and required officers to document the factual basis for escalating a disturbance call into a weapons detention. No policy could erase what happened. That was never Adrian's standard. The standard was whether the next person without rank, cameras, or 4 stars had a better chance of being heard before the cuffs went on. 3 months later, Adrian stopped at Westbridge Market again. Same lot, same row. He parked 2 spaces away from where it had happened. The younger officer happened to be there buying coffee before shift. She saw him and smiled. No backup convoy today, General? Adrian looked around the quiet lot. I'm trying to keep a low profile. She glanced at the pastry box in his hand. Looks tactical. Highly classified, she laughed. Then her expression settled.
I heard the new dispatch policy went live. I heard... You think it'll matter?
Adrian looked toward the camera above the store entrance. It'll matter if people use it. She nodded. That sounds less inspiring than I expected. It's usually how real change sounds. He started toward his car. She called after him, General? He turned. I'm glad I left my camera on. Adrian looked at her. So am I. He got into his sedan.
No sirens, no crowd. No one asking him to prove that he belonged there.
Just an ordinary parking lot on an ordinary afternoon. And that was the point. The most important thing about Adrian Cole had never been the 4 stars people finally recognized. It was that before anyone knew his rank, the facts were already the facts. The couple had lied before they knew who he was. The sergeant had ignored contradictions before he knew who he was. The cameras had recorded the truth before anyone knew who he was. Rank only forced people to look faster. Justice came from what the evidence showed once they did.